Welcome to another very interesting episode of Come Let Us Reason Together. Now, I'll be starting from the book of Judges 18, verse 27, and it's more of a quote of what you should take to heart, because we've said before that the Lord detests disobedience, number one, and number two, idolatry. We know, because I've done a couple of videos about it, the idol that Micah made, and the Danites eventually took it, went to the city of Laish, routed that whole city, set it on fire. Why? Because they were isolated, no relationships. So again, the importance of relationships. But I'm not going to go over all that again, but I just want you to hold this for the weekend. 27, then they took what? Then they took what Micah had made. So it was made by man as a god. It wasn't God. It was Micah. Well, if you want to go really back, it was his mom who made a silver god for herself, and then he made other gods and then made his kids the priests. So they took what Micah had made and his priests. Remember the priest for hire? And we said he was the grandson of Moses, even though Moses was the brother of Aaron, a Levite from the clan of the Kohathites. We said only the lineage of Aaron were consecrated, were anointed by God to serve as priests and chief priests. All the other Levites were to assist them, including Moses. But in this case, we see that the grandson of Moses was the priest to this thing that Micah had made, and went on to Laish. Laish was that city that we said was peaceful, prosperous, and quiet, but isolated. So of course, they attacked them with the sword and burned down the whole city. And since they had no relationship with anyone and they lived so far away and isolated, despite their security, they were taken down easily, because you need relationships sometimes to be able to survive. Now I'll skip to verse 30, and it says that the Danites, because when they took the city of Laish, they changed the name and called it the city of Dan. And it's called Dan till today and tomorrow. There the Danites set up for themselves the idol, that thing that Micah made. Okay, and Jonathan, the priest, who was a Levite, but was not consecrated by God because he was not of the lineage of Aaron to be a priest. They made him a priest, so priest for hire. And he was the son of Gershom, whom we know was the son of Moses. And his sons were priests for the tribe of the Danites until the time of the captivity of the land. Look at that. They continued to use the idol that Micah made as their god. They continued to use the idol that Micah made all the time. The house of God was in Shiloh. So the house of God was in Shiloh, but they had their own God whom they worshipped until the time of the captivity. That was when, for instance, the kingdom had separated at that point. There was northern Israel, and there was Judah with, Benjamin, because the Lord left just the tribe of Judah in keeping with his promise. So we said before that sometimes the Lord, especially if or when man wants to intervene, the Lord actually allows you to intervene. So he makes a detour in his plans and in his promises and his covenants with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But then there's a self-correction that takes place eventually. So, he let them do what they wanted, because further on we'll see that they were clamoring for a king, just like the other people before, around them. Because the Lord gave them prophets and priests and the Levites to help organize worship in the temple where the Ark of the Tabernacle was, and eventually in Jerusalem, as we shall see. So because they clamored, the Lord said, okay, fine. So he chose a Benjaminite, who was Saul. Saul was the first king that was, chosen, even though he was not from the lineage of Judah. We said it before that, the lineage of Judah was to be the royal priesthood, okay? But clearly Saul was from the tribe of Benjamin, and we know what happened to the tribe of Benjamin just in the very next chapter in Judges, in that very, very interesting story about a Levite and his concubine, how the tribe of Judah, of Benjamin, was wiped out completely, except for the 600 men who ran for dear life to the rocks of Rimmon and hid there. And then, of course, bias, remorse, guilty conscience, a sense of what? We nearly annihilated one tribe out of the 12. So quickly the Israelites came together, decided, all right, we have to find brides for them. So they said, oh, which tribe didn't attend the meeting when we were trying to, carry out this whole operation? They said, the tribe of Jabesh Gilead did not attend. And Jabesh Gilead, they are descendants of Manasseh. So, and we know that Manasseh was one of the sons of Joseph, and Ephraim also was one of the sons of Joseph. And Ephraim was, in fact, the younger one. Manasseh was the senior when Jacob was about to bless them, because he took them in as his own children. And he blessed them, but he crossed his hands, blessed Ephraim as if he was the first, and Manasseh as if he was the second, even though Joseph arranged them such that the blessings of the firstborn will come to Manasseh, but it went to Ephraim instead. But we'll see how that played out eventually, because down the track, the tribes of Ephraim and the tribes of Dan were missing amongst the 144,000 that were chosen, that were marked, that were saved in the book of Revelation. And the tribes of Levi got back in, and Joseph got back in to complete the 12. And I believe it was the disobedience and the idolatry of both the tribes of Ephraim as well as the tribe of Dan that caused them to go against one or two of the cardinal sins that were not to be forgiven by the Lord. So anyway, we read the story about the Levites and his concubine, and what I want us to take from this whole story, apart from the fact that the Lord hates idolatry, was the fact that, they were willing to go all out, even against their own, just to keep, the commandments that the Lord had given them. So, but, when they realized that they were nearly, wiping out one of their own, they decided to get wives for them. And if you want to read the whole story, you have to read the whole book. So from there on, we go to the book of Ruth. We know the story of Ruth, how there was famine again in the time in Israel, and so she was married to a guy called Elimelech, and they moved to the town of the Moabites. And Elimelech had two sons, obviously, Mahlon and Chilion. And they married two Moabite ladies. One, was Oprah, or Opha, and the other one was Rahab. And we know that Elimelech died, then the first son died, and then the second one died. So she became a widow, and she was so bitter, such that she wanted to rename herself and call herself Mara, meaning bitter. The Lord has dealt bitterly with me. So she wanted to go back. She heard that, the Lord had returned, been kind to Israel. So she wanted to return to her place. And so she told the two ladies, go back to your folks. You're too young, just get married, carry on with your lives. And, they were, hesitant, to say the least, in the first instance. But eventually, one of them left, but Ruth decided to stay on. We know the famous verse, I'll go wherever you go, your people shall be my people, and your God shall be my God. So she went on and went back with her to Bethlehem Ephratah, and down the track, she became part of the lineage of Jesus Christ. Now, the thing that I want to point out here is that God can take whatever you've considered rubbish, whatever you think is unworthy, whatever you think, you failed at, or you're not up to, or you're small, you're insignificant. God can take you and make it into something great, into something royal, into something regal. We know that down the track, Ruth became the lineage, part of the lineage of Jesus Christ. So did Rahab. You remember Rahab from Jericho, the prostitute? She became part of the lineage of Jesus Christ. Because if you take the lineage of Judah, for instance, he too had 3 sons. And the first son married, and then he died, a lady called Tamar. And the custom was that if you die without a child, your brother could marry your wife and have a child for you to continue your lineage. So that child, even though the child was sired by your brother, but the child actually bears your name. So that second one didn't want to do it. Each time it was time to, sow the seed, let's just put it that way, he kind of, threw it out. So the Lord was really ticked off with him, let's put it mildly, and so he died too. So, but the third son was pretty young, quite young, and Judah told the lady, look, do you want to wait for him to be old enough? Go to your people, and when he's old enough to be married, in those days they married pretty early anyway, I imagine. I'll call you back, and he'll fulfill his responsibilities to his brothers. So when time came, well, Judah pretended to have forgotten the promise. So he didn't call her back, and she waited and waited, and it was becoming embarrassing. So after Judah's wife died, he mourned her appropriately, and then he decided to go out on the town with his friends, so to speak. And so he went to the city gate, and Tamar heard that Judah was going to the city gate. So she dressed herself up as a prostitute and sat by the city gate. And I'm sure after a couple of drinks, Judah came by and said, how much for the whole ding? And she was like, oh, So they had their time, and she didn't take any payments. And she said, well, I'll take your staff, so that, the following day when you come with the money, you can take your staff back, and so on. So a deal was struck, and he left. So he came back the following day and was asking the townspeople, where's the prostitute that was here at the city gate just yesterday? They were like, what prostitute? There's never been a prostitute there. But someone was there. Was I that drunk? So anyway, long story short, he went back, to his home, and, to everyone's amazement, Tamar became pregnant. And, if you're pregnant without out of wedlock, it was like a taboo. And everyone was so self-righteous. It's like, kill her, you know, how could you? So they brought her out, I'm sure, to stone her or something to that effect, what they normally do to ladies like that. So she was like, I could see all these Pharisee-looking people, Sadducees, and the council of the Sanhedrins, you know, just hanging around, just waiting to pass judgment, and like, away with her, kill her. So she said, yes, I'm pregnant, and I'm pregnant for the man who owns this staff. When Judah saw it, oh, my heart, I'm sure his heart sank. He was like, oh, my heart, I have wronged you. I am sorry. So he admitted his faults, knowing that he didn't fulfill his promise to her to give her his third son so that, you know, she could produce children for his other sons that were dead. So, you know, she was spared. Thank God, good judgment was made. She was spared, and she gave birth to two sons, Zerah and Perez. Now, the lineage of Perez, if you continue like up to 11 or 12 generations down, or 13, I can't remember now. I counted it in another video. You know, one of the descendants married Rahab, and they gave birth to Boaz, who married Ruth, who came back from Moab with Naomi. And so the child produced from that union between Ruth and Boaz was Obed. And Obed, as we know, was the father of Jesse. And Jesse was the father of David, King David, the famous King David. So you see how the Lord can turn an impossible situation and smoothen and make the crooked road straight. Especially if everything is, you know, going according to his plan. There was a deviation, okay? He chose the Benjaminites, Saul, because the people demanded it. It was outside of God's plan, so he let them have what they wanted. Again, I did another video where I said, you know, he told Samuel, don't worry, don't be annoyed. It's not you they've rejected, it's me. But I'll give them a king, no problem. You organize it, give them a king, but tell them, when you get a king, this is what the king will demand of you, will demand of your daughters. He will take this, take that, send your kids to war, blah, 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 all these things the Lord told them. And that was precisely how it happened. And again, we just spoke about King David. We know his story of, you know, how he was chosen. His big 7 brothers, they were big, they were in the army. I can only imagine that, you know, they were maybe described like Absalom or even Saul himself, because they said he was a good head taller than anyone, while Absalom was described as being the most handsome man you can think of. So, you know, a proper alpha male. But David was just a shepherd boy. Nobody would have thought of him, even when, you know, when the prophet went to his father Jesse, the big brothers were paraded first, and they even forgot about David until the prophet says, surely there must be another child, because, you know, the Lord won't put out a word and not carry it through. So there was the course correction there. So it went back again to the tribe of Judah. And that's how that, you know, lineage went until another idolatrous king, King Jeroboam, rebelled against King Rehoboam, who was the son of Solomon. And, you know, there was a revolt because the yoke that Solomon put on the people, wise as he was foolish in many ways. I don't see how you can cope with 1,000 wives and not be affected one way or the other. So instead of listening to the counsel of the elders when his father died, he decided to listen to his mates, okay? You can't buy experience. And so he doubled their yoke, doubled their taxes. And so the people revolted, of course. And an Ephraimite called Jeroboam led the revolt. And of course, the kingdom was already divided. And even David was told that the kingdom will be divided, but he won't see it. And for the promise that God made to David, it won't happen even in the time of Solomon, so that both of them won't see it. So, but the son of Solomon, Rehoboam, the kingdom was divided, and 10 of the tribes were moved up and were considered northern Israel, or the hill country of Ephraim, because Jeroboam was an Ephraimite. And we remember they built a golden bull and worshipped it at Bethel. Okay, and their capital was Samaria. Meanwhile, Judah, the Lord left one tribe, Judah, because of the covenant and the promise he had made to the ancestors of the Israelites. And well, Benjamin, the tribe of Benjamin, just happened to be near, former Jebus, as we said, and Jerusalem was just there, so they kind of just stayed back. And the Danites were at the northernmost tip of northern Israel. So they had their gods. In fact, they were worshiping other gods before even the Ephraimites came along. And so the Lord allowed them to do their thing. And because he had promised again that, the royal lineage, Jesus Christ, will come from the tribe of Judah. After using his instruments of punishment, we've talked about it in another video, the Assyrians had a habit of, conquering a nation and then sacking the whole country, like driving everyone out and dividing them up amongst, other conquered places, so that they won't come together and form a coup, or do a revolt, excuse me, and so on. So he sacked them like that. And the Assyrians were vicious of all the other, bad hombres or bad actors, the Babylonians, the Persians, the Egyptians, and so on, the Akkadians, and any town they attacked, they took. The only city they didn't take was Jerusalem. So northern Israel was, sacked by the Assyrians. Judah was also sacked by the Babylonians. And what the Babylonians do is to take the very best of the country and kind of leave the dregs. No one's a dreg, but they leave the dregs of the country, but they take the very best, the royalty, the rich people, the smart, educated, maybe in this day and time, the doctors, the engineers, those kind of people, scientists, and the really smart people and the royal court people, and take them to Babylon and madrasalize them and and reschool them, okay? And reschool them in the Babylonian way, so that they can serve in the king's court, which was exactly what happened for 70 years, as predicted right from the book of Isaiah and the book of Jeremiah, of course. And after the 70 years were done, the Lord remembered them and came to them. And, during the reign of King Cyrus the Great, they were allowed. Actually, King Nebuchadnezzar was the first to say, oh, you can worship your God. Maybe before you could only do that in private. But, after he saw the handiwork of God, he said all the people in his kingdoms must worship the God of the Israelites. But he didn't say they could go back to Israel or to Jerusalem. It was only King Cyrus. Again, King Cyrus was mentioned, decades earlier in the book of Isaiah. I will raise up my servant Cyrus, and he will set you free from the captivity, even though he does not know me. It's there in Isaiah, and that's the way it happened. King Cyrus came, and his butler then was Nehemiah, and he was looking sad, and he said, "Oh, why are you sad?" He said, "Well, how can I not be sad when I'm here enjoying myself and the temple of my Lord is in ruins?" So Cyrus said, "Who's stopping you from going to rebuild the temple? You can go and rebuild the temple, and in fact, everything that's needed within the temple and to build it will be paid from the royal treasury." Can you imagine that? Will be paid from the royal treasury. And not just that, he gave letters to all the vassal kings along the way, from Babylon to Jerusalem, to say anything they required, wood, silver, gold, whatever, just give it to them. They are not runaway people, so don't try to capture them and bring them back to me. I have given them permission to go back, so help them. And then all the utensils, the sacred and anointed cups that were taken during the time of Nebuchadnezzar, they were actually cataloged and kept. And he made the how will I say, the data scientists or whoever catalogs all these things to bring them out, and they counted them and they were complete, and they gave it to them and said, "Take it back and use it to rebuild the temple." Now that is the way God works. He works his plans, and all things work together for the good of those who love the Lord and according to his plans. I hope you've enjoyed today's Bible study. I'll see you at the next one. Thanks for viewing.